Hello and welcome to another episode of At My Desk. I'm your host, Dr. William Lester, and I want to thank you for joining me. Today I want to talk about something that's kind of fun and enjoyable for me and has been for a long time. I want to talk about animation, and not just kind of willy-nilly random animation, but some of the forms of animation in general and some of the television and movies that these animation techniques have appeared in down through the years. So I'm going to start with what's probably my favorite. And this is something that will have appeal to those of you of a certain generation. And like a lot of these things, newer generations of people may see them and become fans. Now, of course, today, almost all the special effects and all the animation techniques are digital. But, of course, there was a time when that just wasn't the case. And the technique that became near and dear to my heart was the stop motion special effect type animation, which was made famous by the late Ray Harryhausen. And I was enjoying these films, which were mostly fantasy films and science fiction films. I was enjoying these films as a child, and I enjoyed these films for years before I knew about the man behind the special effects. And you must remember, too, that I'm talking about a time before the days of the proliferation of cable television, before the concept of home entertainment, when most of these movies were being shown on a local UHF station. So I have a couple of samples with me. And another great thing about this is that almost all of these movies and TV shows now are available on DVD or on demand somewhere on your cable system or Netflix or Hulu. Or now, listen, that's the one upside to this saturation of technology. All of these things are available to us now. So anyway, we're talking about Harryhausen. So I was just kind of plowing through my personal collection. And if you haven't seen any of these, I'm going to recommend them all because they're all available. So we're going to start with 20 Million Miles to Earth. And of course, this film features Dennis Hopper, who of course became famous soon after for his portrayal of private detective Paul Drake on the Perry Mason television series. But it features a really cool creature, the Emir from Venus. And again, the stop motion animation is just, it's a lot of fun. A very cool little science fiction movie from the 50s. And if you get this edition, this is a really cool edition because there's two discs in the package. And one of these discs is actually the film in color. And it's not done in some kind of cheesy, cartoonish way. I mean, it's really well done, rich, vibrant color, great definition, great audio. 20 Million Miles to Earth. Next, another Harryhausen, another science fiction classic. It's called Earth versus the Flying Saucers. So you should see the flying saucers moving in accordance to that Harryhausen stop motion technique. It's very cool. And if you see this film, look for the destruction of the Washington Monument and the Capitol building when the flying saucers crash into them. It's a fantastic movie. And again, from the 50s, Earth versus the flying saucers. From the same time period, we have It Came from Beneath the Sea. Really fun film. This gigantic octopus, and you get to see the tentacles reaching up out of the water and just causing murder and mayhem. But again, same Harryhausen technique, and you know, it just became a staple of the sci-fi fantasy movie genre out of that time period. And there are other films that Harryhausen was responsible for. There was one called The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which I have. I just didn't pull it out for our show today. That one is in black and white from the early 50s, I think. But that's one that's definitely worth looking for and watching. Okay. Still on Harryhausen. He did a series of films based on Greek mythology, and the one I'm thinking of is Jason and the Argonauts, of course, from 1963. And this one is memorable to me because of the zombie warriors, these skeletonized warriors that come up out of the ground and attack Jason and his men. And they have this fantastic sword fight. And you know, because it's stop motion animation, it was an incredible technical achievement. And so the movie's worth seeing for that scene alone. There's lots of other creature effects in the film, believe me. But the skeleton warrior, the zombie warrior scene, just alone is worth watching the film for. But there are also the harpies and the Hydra, which had 7 heads, and you get to see Jason in combat against this 7-headed dragon type creature. So lots of fun. From the Tales of the Arabian Night, of course, comes Sinbad, and there are 3 films here that I thought were worth mentioning because of the creature effects by Harryhausen. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, which of course features this great Cyclops and this great dragon. Try to get it closer. Just a lot of fun, pure escapism, pure fantasy, thanks to Harryhausen. Now, one school of thought says, well, look at the CGI animation. It can make things look 100% real, or very close to reality. And that's true. But when I think about the creatures and the monsters that Harryhausen created and animated, and how they move, and that characteristic movement that they have, for me, that technique provides a more real sense of fantasy. It's got more of a fantasy quality to it. It's not supposed to be lifelike and realistic. We're talking about dragons and hydras and skeleton warriors and a cyclops. So there's going to be an element of fantasy. And I think Harryhausen's technique built upon that. There was also Sinbad in the Eye of the Tiger, where there's a great fight scene between a saber-toothed cat and this large creature called a troglodyte, which is kind of like a fictional predecessor to the human race. A big club-wielding brute that's also has a protagonistic quality to him. And also in this movie, Sinbad is portrayed by Patrick Wayne, son of John Wayne. So there you go. In the Golden Voyage of Sinbad, there are great creature effects. The three main creatures are the centaur and this Vishnu type Hindu creature with multiple arms and therefore multiple swords, and also the griffin, which is one of my favorite creatures. This is the Golden Voyage of Sinbad. So Harryhausen is just a pioneer in animation and special effects techniques. Also, in that same vein is 1 million years BC. And I know, you know, guys out there, I know it's world famous and iconic for the legendary Raquel Welch, 1966. I get it. But in between all that, look at Harryhausen's animation of the Allosaurus and the pterodactyl and the giant prehistoric sea turtle, Archeron. Very good movie. All right. So that's Harryhausen. Can never get enough of it. Now I want to talk about a gentleman, Ralph Bakshi. And Ralph Bakshi made tremendous use of an animation technique called rotoscope. And rotoscope is a very interesting technique in which animation, coloring, painting, animation is superimposed onto live action footage. And it gives it a remarkable quality of realism in terms of the movement, the fluidity of the movement in the characters. I fell in love with this technique the minute I saw it, and so I became a Bakshi fan. And so I have 3 films here that really illustrate this. The first one is his adaptation of Lord of the Rings, which I think is like 1977, 78. And it is chock full of these scenes done in rotoscope. I really recommend it. Really good movie. The other one is a very bizarre, abstract fantasy piece that he did also in the 70s called Wizards. And it's got a few more grown-up moments and themes to it. Great guy film. Again, the rotoscope technique. This film is a very interesting examination of The idea is that there is a conflict between technology and mysticism. Okay, and there is an antagonist in the film named Black Wolf, and he's living on Earth, or people are living on Earth hundreds and thousands of years after a nuclear holocaust. But in this reality, after the Holocaust, magic has entered into the world, and wizardry and sorcery, what have you. And Black Wolf has a twin brother named Avatar. And Avatar is a wise, old, benevolent wizard. Black Wolf is a vindictive, power-hungry, uh, maniacal individual who's trying to rule the world. So Black Wolf discovers all of this lost, hidden technology. And he feels that he can utilize this technology to build an unstoppable war machine. And so the film is full of metaphor and symbolism about, technology and magic. And there are metaphors, and there's lots of commentary on the pitfalls of things like hyper excessive nationalism, racism and anti-Semitism, and very good film. Very good film. But again, we're talking about this rotoscoping technique, and it is, the way it's laid out here is just fantastic, visually enjoyable. Finally, Bakshi teamed up with one of the great fantasy artists of the 20th century, maybe the greatest, Frank Frazetta, okay, to do a film called Fire and Ice. And this story is done in a backdrop similar to what you would see in something like Conan the Barbarian, that type of setting. Again, between these two competing factions, and which are symbolized through the power of ice and moving glaciers, and the power of fire in the form of flowing lava. So it's got a great fantasy, epic feel to it. And again, with this rotoscoping, it just amps it up even more. So I recommend these three Bakshi films: Lord of the Rings, Wizards, and Fire and Ice. I believe if you pick up the Fire and Ice DVD, I think there's some really great commentary in here. At the time the DVD came out, Frank Frazetta was still with us. And so you'll get to see and hear from him, and there'll be some information about his life, his work, etc. If you're a Frazetta fan, and why wouldn't you be, you'll love this movie because it's all based on his artwork. And on top of that, you have this great Bakshi animation style, so you can't lose. Fire and Ice. Now, I also want to pay note to Hanna-Barbera, which of course are legends in the film of animation. When you think about all of the great characters and shows that they have been doing since maybe the 50s, when you look at all of the characters, it's just they built a whole universe, an animated universe. But for me, they really showed their animation chops starting in 1964 with the release of Johnny Quest. Maybe the greatest action-adventure cartoon of all time. Elements of science fiction, adventure, mystery, fantasy. And the animation style was unbelievable because the people and the setting and the backgrounds were not caricatures. They were done and drawn and portrayed realistically. Everything looks real. Heavy shadows, strong dark lines. Everything looks realistic. The action looks realistic. The chase scenes, the creatures, a great assortment of monsters and madmen. So if you can pick this one up, it would be great. I know that it's floating around online with various dealers. It may be a little difficult to find because it came out several years ago, but it is out there. So I wanted to share these animation favorites with you, and I recommend all of them. And I want to thank you for sharing some time and viewing the program. And don't forget to see the next episode because I'll be right here at my desk.